So, welcome to this week's video. As you can tell by my surroundings, the van isn't the only thing that we've upgraded. We've also upgraded our workshop. So we have a nice new area to do our van building stuff in. So we built this shed because we knew there was massive upcoming projects, and because if you've watched our last build series, you'll have seen that we were working outside quite a lot, and then in my old dilapidated tin shed that was falling apart. So we have upgraded our workspace. So no matter what van we picked, the plan was always to be as off-grid as possible, because campsites cost a lot of money and we want to avoid that as much as possible, because the less money we spend on sites, the further we can go and the longer we can go. So being off-grid is an absolute must. If you watched our last van build with our camper van, you'll have seen we put a massive 315 amp hour Fogstar battery into it, and sort of a mix of Victron stuff and Energy stuff, and then the stuff that was already in the van that came with the ambulance. But this time we are going to go high end as possible. So we have a nice fancy motorhome, and we want to make sure we can use all of its luxuries, whether we're plugged in or not. So in order to do this higher end system, we actually started off whenever we bought the van. When we bought the van, we got included with the deal a massive 450 watt solar panel on the van and a 40 amp solar controller, which we've showed you in the van tour. But to complement that system, as you can see, there's quite a lot of blue on this table. We've decided to go Victron for as much as we possibly can, and we've saved a little bit of money where we can, and we've went with eco-worthy lithium batteries. We've went with two 280 amp hour batteries, and there's a couple of reasons why we went with this. We actually originally wanted to go with Fogstar. I know if you'd have seen our previous video, I was sort of iffing and butting about Fogstar, but whenever we got the product was actually amazing. So it was, we really liked that battery. So I did want to get another one, but just due to stock levels, they didn't have the one I wanted at the time. And then Amazon was doing a bit of a deal with the eco-worthy stuff, and then we had eco-worthy solar panels, which were really good as well. So I thought, we'll give these a go because the price was just too good to miss. So starting from left to right, we have our absolute main part of the system, the beast, I'm going to call this, of inverters. This is the Multi+2 3 kVA inverter charger from Victron. So in our camper van, we had an included 1400 watt inverter. And then whenever we needed a wee bit more power, we had our all powers power bank, but it's only about 1800 watt. So you'll see in our previous videos, we have a nice Ninja air fryer, which we quite like to use to cook with, but due to power constraints, we could only use one drawer at a time. With this absolute beast, we don't have any constrictions at all for power. With that powered up with these batteries, we will be able to use pretty much anything we want. So we can run the air fryer, both drawers at a time, be watching TV, charging laptops, charging phones, camera gear. We'll never run out of power with this system. So to connect the whole system together, we have actually went with the Lynx power in bus bar system. This is because it carries 1000 amps. So if I want to add more batteries, I can do that with this bus bar system. And if we would need to attach more items, we can also do that with this bus bar system. To monitor the batteries, I've actually went with the Smart Shunt 1000 amps. And again, the reason why I went with this is because of future upgradability. So although this is a 560 amp system, probably maximum pulling of about 400 amps due to the BMS constrictions. So we're well within tolerance. We could have went 500 amps if we didn't move anything, but just to keep us future-proofed, we went with 1000 amp. To charge this entire system, we have decided to go with the Orion-Tr 50 amp DC to DC charger. So the van comes with just a normal Sargent split charge system, which we will be bypassing with the relay. We're just waiting for that to come, as well as a couple of fuses for our batteries. But as soon as that comes, we'll be able to get everything fitted. But this is what's going to charge. So we'll be able to charge at 50 amps when we're driving. And then with the 40 amps from the solar, we shouldn't ever run out of power. But again, the Victron Multi+ also charges at 120 amps. So we went bigger batteries, bigger charging capabilities with our DC to DC solar and our plug-in, and bigger power usage. One thing to note with this Victron Multi+ 2, even though it's incredibly expensive, it doesn't come with any Bluetooth features, and it also has to be programmed. So this is quite high end. You sort of need to know what you're doing, sort of thing. So to go with it, what we have is we've went with the VE Bus Smart Dongle. What this allows us to do is once we have it programmed, We can turn the inverter on and off with our phone, monitor certain things, and then when we go to the likes of Europe, some of the campsites and such, you can maybe only get about 6 amps of electricity when you plug in. So what I can do is I can tell the Victron to either maybe just charge the batteries using the 6 amps, and then we can use the inverter capabilities to actually power what we're using, but then again it's still charging the batteries, or we can just tell it just to pull 6 amps for our plug sockets and everything. And then to program it, we have the USB to RJ45 connection. Now that I have this, there's potential for, if there are any other sort of van lifers, maybe in north of Ireland, south of Ireland, who are interested in this sort of thing and maybe need a wee bit of help with programming, I have this. So if you want, leave in the comments and maybe we can do some collaborations together and we can learn from each other. Moving to the other side of the shed, where we have our storage racks, we have all our accessories and bits to connect the whole system together. So here we have some of our mega fuses, which will go into the Lynx power in. We have a mega fuse holder, just in case we need extra fuses. We have unopened Amazon packages, which I think are crimp connections, because I have some from our last build, but I got some more just in case we'll need them. In here, again, more crimp connections. You can see these are quite beefy, and that's because we've got quite beefy cable to go for all this power that we have. And then here we have our main battery isolator, which I should just check. Yes, main battery isolator. And then we have an isolator for our 12 volt and another one for our DC to DC. So if you're wondering where we got all this equipment, we got the majority of it off 12 Volt Planet. So I want to give a special mention to 12 Volt Planet. We aren't affiliated or partners with 12 Volt Planet or anything. We paid for all this with our own money, but so far the customer service has been brilliant. We ordered the stuff and everything came really, really quickly. So the customer service and support from them has been brilliant. And then all the other van lifers as well are using 12 Volt Planet, so we know if there's an issue that we will be helped. So now that we've went through all our bits and pieces for our power system that we're going to put in the van, we're now going to start and see whereabouts it's going to fit. So before we actually got the van, what I did was I actually measured out the side seat, because it actually lifts up and becomes sort of the fold out bed. So I lifted that up and measured the inside space to see what we could fit in there. Now, fingers crossed I've done this right, and we can fit our batteries in, our links, our battery to battery, and all our bits and pieces in. Now, the problem's going to be the big massive inverter. So it might have to be side mounted in there. I know that's not really the best way to do it, because you're meant to do it sort of vertical to allow heat to rise, but worst comes to worst, we'll maybe put some extra ventilation in there. So I need to figure out what way it's all going to fit in. It would be ideal if we still had a little bit of storage in there, but we're not counting that as a possibility. The best case scenario is we can fit everything in and give it plenty of space. I have encountered a couple of issues which I didn't think about whenever I last measured it, and that was just a couple of wires run away. So the overall space I thought I have is actually a lot less now. But I've put the bits and pieces in, giving myself a rough idea of what way it's going to fit. So now that I have that idea, what I've done is I put a bit of foam down just to stop any vibrations, because things are going to be very tight. And now I'm just going to lift these into place for what I think is going to be the layout that the batteries in the inverter are going to go in. So I've had the batteries in the inverter and stuff in and out a good few times, just trying to make the best use of the space. We're going to completely lose this storage, so we are to this system. We're just not going to have the space for anything else, but we have made it fit. So the layout is going to be, the two batteries are going to be butted up pretty close to the Sargent unit. The inverter is going to be along this plate here. The distributor is going to be on this wall, as well as the shunt and the battery to battery. So all the wires are going to have to sort of run down and then split off, so they are, and then a couple of the wires will run from in behind as well. It's a really, really tight space. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend doing it the way we're doing it. If you could get away with one battery, that would be the right way to do it, just to give you more space. But this is what we have, so this is what we're going to work with. But definitely just really strongly consider doing this. One thing you could do to help alleviate the space would be to take the inverter out of here altogether. For cabling reasons, you do want the inverter to be as close to the system as possible. However, you could mount the inverter maybe in the likes of a cupboard or a wardrobe, and then run the cables that way, but your cables would need to be really, really thick. So we don't want to do that. We want to avoid all that. So we're putting everything in this cupboard here. I have everything sort of laid out the way I wanted it. And now what I've started to do is run cables. So I've ran a couple of cables from the front of the van for the battery to battery into the cabinet here. And then I've just started running all my cables for my batteries and my bus bar and the inverter. Now this is going to be different for everybody's setup, so I can't really run you through how to do this. But because the system is going to be quite high amperage, I've had to run 2 cables for positive, 2 cables for negative, which are quite chunky cables from the batteries to the bus bar. So it's quite tight space in here, and because of that, what I've done, I've actually moved the battery to battery to beside the Sargent, because I can just run the cables then in behind the Sargent wiring. So we're about 75% of the way done. What I've done is I have put everything in place and wired it up. So the Victron's now wired up, the batteries are all wired up into the bus bar. The only thing that isn't wired is the actual van 12 volt stuff. So in order to do that, what I need is a wee relay, and the relay cancels out the split charger from the Sargent system, so that whenever we're using our battery to battery charger, the two aren't fighting against each other, because you can't use a split charge relay on lithium batteries. You can only use it for lead acid. So I need to pull that across and the solar, and then that's all the electrical side done. If everything's sitting waiting, the battery to battery charger is all wired in as well. It's just isolated at the moment, and then the fuse isn't in for the battery part yet. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to give the 240 volt side of things a quick test. So the Victron unit, as I said before, needs to be programmed. So I have my wee programmer here. We're going to connect it onto the laptop, and we're going to start to go through the settings for the Victron unit. Now that we have the software downloaded on the computer and we are connected to the inverter charger, I'm now going to go through and try and set up a few of the settings. So the first setting that we need to do is the charger part, and we need to tell it that it's a lithium battery. Now whenever we tell it it's a lithium battery, it'll pretty much go by preset settings, which is usually fine for most situations. So I just hit lithium battery, okay, and then that should set everything for the absorption charge, which is 14.2, float charge 13.5, and then once it gets to like 95%, that will cut the bulk charge. I went through some of the settings on the inverter charger. Now you can pretty much just go lithium and those settings will be pretty good, but what I do is I just go into ChatGPT, tell it what system I'm using, see if any of the settings are a wee bit different, and then just tweak the settings to match. So a really good thing about the Victron stuff is you can control it all from an app on your phone. So I've just put on the Victron app, and it lets me, I can turn on the inverter, turn it on for charging, and then whenever we're away, if we're not getting 32 amp or 16 amps of hookup, I can change it down to whatever the trip is for that site if we need it. And I can also see the state of charge of both my batteries because we have the smart shunt put on this as well. So that is it for this week's video. As you can see, this is an absolute massive upgrade to our off-grid capabilities from what we had before. As you can see from the wee app there, I'm charging a laptop and we have 5 days worth of charge just for charging a laptop, which is absolutely phenomenal. So we can't wait to get the air fryer in here and test that. So we can't. So off camera, between this week's video and the next video, we're going to tidy this all up and get this van ready for a trip. So stay tuned to watch that.